When the screens turned back on, Rigel, Gesso, and Nelson could barely tell the difference. There was water below them, but it was dark. There were hardly any lights to be seen amongst the hills. The only thing to really let them know that the screens were all on were the ones pointed skyward, displaying the multitude of stars above them. "Wow," Nelson said as he looked into the star-filled screens. "Look at that." "Seen it," Rigel said as he went back to the checklist. "Cloaking device set?" he asked Gesso. Gesso came to his senses. He was looking at the expanse of stars, too. Check," he said after looking at the switch. "Check star charts and confirm the date," Rigel said to himself as he went over to the computer's display and began matching up stars. "Check. Okay. Looks like we're right where we need to be. The date would be March 25th, 5046 pre-standard calendar, or 5 BCE according to the previous calendar. We need to find this town. Bethlehem, right?" Gesso asked. "Right. Plug in the navigational coordinates and it should take us there." Gesso plugged in the last set of numbers, and the ocean began to move below them in their view screens. They rapidly approached the hills in the distance, and were soon flying over an ocean of sand rather than of water. They all watched as small camps, illuminated by campfires, and small villages passed by underneath their ship. The ship passed over another small ridge of hills before coming to a stop above a village in a broad valley. "Recording equipment on," Rigel said as he flipped a few switches. Gesso flipped a few more. "Now we just wait and observe." Nelson rolled over and picked up the book that had been marked and began reading the passages highlighted about the event that they were recording. "So what's the deal with this guy anyway?" he asked. "A great deal, in fact," Rigel replied. "Don't go getting too much into that book. We've got a job to do here. You're not just part of the ride, Senator. While you're here, you might as well help us observe." "Right. So why is this baby so important?" Rigel picked up the log. "According to this, before the cataclysm, this baby was the focus of one of the ancient religions. That book supposedly chronicled his life. So, as you probably already know, for as long as we've been able to do things like this, we've been going back to record various events that supposedly took place in that book as well as others like it. Some we've confirmed, others we haven't, and some are just a bunch of hooey. This event is one of the last ones left before we move on to other events." "Why the last?" Gesso asked. Rigel looked at the log. "There's no date given in the book there, so it's been hard to track down the proper year. The only real clue was the name of the king, so that gave us a range, but nothing precise. Also, the followers of the religion celebrated the birthday near the winter solstice." Rigel looked at the log notes. "December 25th, according to this. None of our previous survey trips during that date discovered anything. They searched around it, and still nothing. So we've had to conduct these sweeps based on other knowledge we've since rediscovered. Then the last survey came back saying that they found the family leaving, so now we have narrowed the range down to these 2 weeks. We've recorded everything else about this man except for this." Rigel put down the log and flashed a rare smile at Gesso. "I guess that makes us lucky." Gesso nodded. "Lucky indeed." For 7 days the 3 men sat in their hovering ship, waiting for a sign. No one matching the description of the husband and his pregnant wife appeared. There was still no star. The sun was setting behind low hills, and they continued to sit and wait for some sign. "Still no sign of any stellar activity," Nelson stated as he looked at the screens displaying the darkening night sky. The last sliver of the moon had vanished, leaving very little light to see with. Rigel set low light amplifiers on and continued to observe the village of Bethlehem. "I didn't realize when I asked to ride along how boring this all was." "It's got to be sometime soon," Rigel stated. "They saw the family leaving the village a little over a week from now." "Then they should be here soon," Nelson assured. "What was this star supposed to be again?" he asked. "Who knows?" Rigel answered. We've not been able to figure it out. Some speculate that it might have been a supernova, but there isn't any astronomical sign of a supernova happening during this time. It's been one of the puzzles that hasn't been figured out yet, which is why we're here. Rigel scanned the screens once again. The town's streets were becoming empty, but movement near the edge of town caught his eye. Wait, I think I have something. Rigel sat up and looked carefully at the screen that caught his attention. He pushed a few buttons and magnified the image. A man was walking next to a woman, riding a donkey or mule. Gesso, wake up! I think we got them, he said excitedly. Finally, Gesso said with some relief as he beleagueredly climbed up the ladder and took his position. Rigel nodded and began to focus all of the recording equipment onto this couple. All three watched as a man led the donkey toward a building and began talking with another man there. The language was completely foreign to all of them, but the translator began to interpret the conversation for them. The man leading the donkey looked dejected and began walking away from the building as the computer translated the last of the conversation. No room at the inn, Gesso quoted from the book. Rigel and Nelson looked over at him and then went back to the screens. They watched as the couple made their way to the manger directly below their ships. Looks like the coordinates were correct, Rigel stated. He flipped some more switches and pressed a few buttons. Multiple views of the manger came into view on the screens before Rigel. One group of screens were light amplified, but only showed the roof of the building. Another group were infrared and displayed the animals inside the manger as well as the man, woman, and donkey. Another set of screens were able to penetrate the building and see inside. Hours passed as they watched the couple in the screens. The husband made several trips out of the manger, occasionally accompanied by other people or various items. It was obvious that the woman was in labor. The microphones directed at the manger picked up everything, and the computer translated it all. They kept their vigil until the view screens and the microphones recorded the birth of the child inside. That's it, get the time, Rigel commanded. Gesso began flipping switches. Star charts and sun measurements indicate 00 hours and 5 minutes. 5 minutes past midnight. Date, Rigel nearly yelled. We need to adjust the scale to the current calendar, which makes the date April 1st, 5 BCE. Rigel looked at Gesso with a smile. Happy New Year's, he said. Nelson looked away from his screens. Huh? Isn't that in January? It is on our calendar, yes, Rigel replied before he looked back at the screens. On this day, most local cultures celebrated it on April 1st. The tradition of fun and celebration continued for thousands of years afterward, even after the date was shifted to January. April Fool's Day, Gesso said as he looked at his head. Exactly, Rigel half chuckled. What a day to be born. They watched for a while longer before Nelson let out a big yawn. That's it. I've had it, gentlemen. I'm going down to get some shut-eye. He rolled his chair along to the hatch in the floor and opened it up. And I need to use the head, Gesso added as he too left his station and rolled for the hatch. He watched Nelson climb down the ladder and then looked over at Rigel. Rigel was deeply concentrated on the infrared screens as he watched the activity inside the manger. Gesso reached out and flipped a switch and then climbed down the ladder after Nelson. A short while later, and Gesso climbed back up the ladder and joined Rigel at the monitors. They continued to watch the manger. Within an hour after the child's birth, they noticed that people were beginning to gather around and inside the manger. They watched as people from the outlying countryside began to filter into the town and make their way for the manger. Word spreads fast, Gesso commented. Yes, I wonder how they know to come here. Rigel looked at Gesso. The star? Gesso asked. Rigel looked like he could have hit himself. Look, quick! Gesso checked the screens displaying the stars above. Nothing, he said. That's just odd, Rigel said as he went back to the infrared screens in front of him. No wise men yet, though? Gesso asked. Doesn't look like it. I think they visit the next day. Then we'll have to stay until they arrive, Gesso stated. What makes you think so? Rigel asked. We've recorded the birth and there's no star to show for it. We can just wait till morning, just to make sure we catch everything and then jump back. I think we should stay at least until the wise men arrive, Jessa replied. I don't see why. Rigel had no sooner uttered the words than he saw one of the other view screens across his console displaying the town below them. The town was well lit from above. Jessa looked at Rigel's curious expression and then turned to see the screen with the town in clear view. It looked as if he were bathed in full moonlight. Star chart said it's a new moon, right? Rigel asked. Right, Jessa answered as he got up and moved to another part of the room. Rigel moved past him and scanned into the star screen. Still no star, he said as he scratched his chin. He looked back to the screen with the town. Then what's causing that lie? Rigel's scan across the console spotted something amiss. The cloak! It's off! Rigel leapt for the console and the cloaking switch. He'd no sooner taken off when something grabbed him by the collar and flung him backwards across the room. Gesso took up his position between Rigel and the console. Gesso? What? I can't allow you to cloak us just yet, Gesso said. There's still a few more hours before the sun begins to appear. Rigel couldn't comprehend what was going on. You flipped the switch? Gesso nodded. On purpose? Gesso nodded again. When? Just after the child's birth. Just as Senator Henderson went to bed, Gesso stated. You didn't notice because you were too busy watching the enhanced video screens to notice the change in the light. It was a calculated risk I had to take, in the hopes that you wouldn't notice it too soon. But they can see the ship! Rigel yelled. True, Gesso confirmed. But the flux in the space-time continuum causes the ship to only appear as a bright ball of light. And we're so high up in the night sky, it would simply be mistaken as a very bright star. Then they see... We're... It was hard for Rigel to wrap his mind about the implications of what happened. That's illegal, he finally shouted as he began to stand back up. We're supposed to record the events as they actually happen, not cause events. He began to advance on Gesso. Gesso raised his hand and Rigel suddenly began to feel very sleepy. He fought to stay awake. They'll fire you for this, Rigel said defiantly, although drowsily. If they don't throw you in jail for altering time. I didn't alter time, Gesso stated as he picked up the book on the console. It's already recorded in the ancient history. I would be altering time by not allowing them to see the ship. No ship, no star. No star, no people at the manger, and no wise men. This way, it all works out as written. We aren't supposed to go by what's written, but by what actually is, Rigel shouted. He began to charge Gesso, but only got so far as Gesso's outstretched hand. Gesso placed his hand on Rigel's shoulder and directed the now sleeping man into his chair. He checked on Rigel to make sure everything was all right. I'm sorry I had to do this, he whispered. Gesso gave a sigh of relief and went back to the console. He watched the view screens and monitored the brightness of the sky outside. With the first signs of light beginning to brighten the sky, Gesso went to the console and flipped the cloaking switch, hiding the ship from sight. What he said about the appearance was only partially true. At night the ship would glow with white light, such it would appear like a bright star. With sunlight, the glow would no longer be bright enough to hide the fact that there was a large flying egg hovering above the town of Bethlehem. The cloak would hide the ship until it became dark enough for the Christmas star to once again appear and light the way for the three wise men. Gesso walked back to Rigel and began the sad task of binding the senior recorder, just as he had already bound the senator. I'm sorry I had to do this, Rigel, he said to the unconscious man, but sometimes these things need to be done. Gesso recalled an ancient and little-known bit of music from a time almost 2,000 years beyond the one that they were currently floating in. He chuckled to himself at the recollection. Even a miracle needs a hand, he stated to himself. Gesso walked back to the console and picked up the book. He took an ink pen from out of the drawer under the console and wrote in the margin near the marked phrase in the book of Matthew. Gesso looked at the book, smiled for a moment, and then looked up at the side of the town of Bethlehem below them in the view screens. He looked back down at the book and took the pen and scratched out the name written there. He wrote another name instead, and then set the book back down on the console. He waited for the rest of the day until such a time as he could turn off the cloaking device again and light the way. Every once in a while he would look down at the book and smile once again. Thanks for watching part 2 of In Time for Christmas. I hope you guys enjoyed it. The first part can be found over in the description down below. And if you liked it, please like it and subscribe. I'll put a little thing, whoops, right over there, actually, yeah. So, yeah, hit the subscribe button and like and pass it along. Share it with your friends. And keep in touch. We'll have more blogs and more stories coming up. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.